James started teasing him again. Alfred, you think you can win over a Lagos big girl with your delivery job? He mocked. You will spend all your money on her and you will still end up poor. You have nothing to do with expensive girls like her. In a bustling city called Lagos, there lived a man named Sir Gilbert. He was not just any man, he was very influential and well known in the business world. Sir Gilbert was the proud owner of a large delivery company that helped people all over the city get their packages and goods on time. His company was so successful that he had many people working for him, and everyone respected him for his kindness and fairness. Sir Gilbert made sure to treat all his staffs well, always listening to their needs and making sure they were happy. Sir Gilbert's life, however, was not all about work. He had once been married to a beautiful woman named Mrs. Gilbert. She was the love of his life, and together they were very happy. But one day, something sad happened. Mrs. Gilbert was about to have a baby, but something went wrong during the birth. Sir Gilbert was blessed with a son, Alfred, but sadly, Mrs. Gilbert did not survive. She passed away, leaving Sir Gilbert heartbroken. Sir Gilbert loved his wife so much that he decided he would never marry anyone else. He wanted to keep her memory alive in his heart and focus all his love on their son Alfred. Sir Gilbert was determined to give Alfred the best life possible. He promised himself that he would do everything he could to make sure Alfred never lacked anything. Alfred grew up surrounded by love and care. His father made sure that he had everything he ever wanted. Alfred's childhood was filled with happiness and comfort. From the moment he started school, Alfred had the best of everything. His father sent him to the finest primary school in the city, where he had the best teachers, the nicest uniforms, and the most interesting books. Alfred loved learning, and he was very curious about the world around him. When Alfred moved on to secondary school, things only got better. His father made sure that Alfred continued to have the best education, the most exciting trips, and all the latest gadgets. Alfred's friends often marveled at how fortunate he was to have such a caring and generous father. But despite all the luxury, Sir Gilbert made sure that Alfred was kind and respectful to everyone around him. He taught Alfred that it was important to be good to others, just as his mother would have wanted. As Alfred grew older, Sir Gilbert began to think about the future. He knew that one day, Alfred would need to take over the family business. Sir Gilbert wanted to make sure that Alfred was well prepared for his responsibility. So after Alfred completed his secondary education, Sir Gilbert made a big decision. He decided to send Alfred to abroad to study. This way, Alfred could learn all the skills he would need to manage the business when Sir Gilbert retired or was no longer around. Alfred was excited about the opportunity to study abroad. He knew it was a big step, but he was ready for the challenges. His father had always believed in him, and now it was time for him to make his father proud. And so, with his bags packed and his heart full of hope, Alfred set off on a new adventure, leaving Lagos behind for the time being, but always carrying the love and lessons from his father with him. After Alfred left for his studies abroad, Sir Gilbert found himself feeling very lonely. The big house that was once filled with laughter and conversation now felt quiet and empty. Sir Gilbert missed his son dearly, but even more, he missed his late wife. He often thought about how different things would have been if she were still alive. But despite his loneliness, Sir Gilbert found comfort in knowing that Alfred was on a path that would help him become successful in life. He knew that sending Alfred abroad to study was the best thing for his future. Sir Gilbert was proud of his son and the decision they had made together. This thought helped ease the sadness in his heart, though he missed him dearly. On the other side of the world, Alfred was on a plane, heading to a country he had never been before. As he looked out of the window at the clouds below, he felt a deep sense of longing for his father. Alfred knew that his father was not the type of person who kept many friends. Sir Gilbert had always been very focused on his work and his family, with little time for socializing. Alfred worried about how his father would cope without him around. He hoped that his father wouldn't feel too lonely in the big house by himself. When the plane finally landed, Alfred found himself in Ukraine. Everything felt new and strange to him. The language was different, the people looked different, and the weather was much colder than what he was used to in Lagos. But Alfred was determined to make the best of this new adventure. He knew that in time he would adapt to his new surroundings and find his way in this unfamiliar place. The first thing Alfred did after arriving in Ukraine was to call his father. He wanted to let him know that he had arrived safely. Sir Gilbert was relieved to hear his son's voice. They talked for a while, with Alfred telling his father about the new place and how different everything seemed. Sir Gilbert listened carefully, offering words of encouragement and reminding Alfred that he was capable of handling whatever challenges came his way. After some time on the phone, they both knew it was time to hang up. Alfred had a lot to do, and Sir Gilbert had to go back to work. They said their goodbyes, promising to stay in touch and talk regularly. As Alfred put down the phone, he felt a mix of emotions. He was excited about the journey ahead, but he also missed his father deeply. Back in Lagos, Sir Gilbert decided to focus even more on his business. He wanted to keep himself busy, so he wouldn't have too much time to dwell on his loneliness. Sir Gilbert was determined to open more branches of his delivery company across the city. He knew that by expanding his business, he could create more jobs and help more people, just as his wife would have wanted. As time went on, Sir Gilbert continued to grow his business in Lagos. He worked tirelessly to make sure his delivery company remained one of the best in the city. New branches were opened and more people were employed. Sir Gilbert took pride in the fact that he was helping so many families by providing jobs and opportunities. His business was thriving, and this kept him occupied, though he still missed his son Alfred. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, Alfred was also focused on his studies. He knew how important it was to make good grades, not just for himself, but also for his father, who had sacrificed so much for him. Alfred studied hard, attended all his classes, and did his best in every exam. Over the years, Alfred made new friends who helped him feel at home in this foreign country. They explored the city together, shared meals, and even celebrated holidays. Alfred grew to love the life he had built in Ukraine. Finally, the day came when Alfred graduated. His hard work paid off, and he received his degree with outstanding results. Sir Gilbert was overjoyed when he heard the news. He was so proud of his son for all he had achieved. Alfred, too, was proud of himself, but there was something else on his mind. By this time, Alfred had become very used to life in Ukraine. The country that once felt strange to him now felt like home. He had grown close to his new friends, and he enjoyed the independence and freedom he had there. As much as he loved his father and missed Nigeria, Alfred didn't feel the same excitement about returning home. The thought of leaving his new life behind made him hesitate. When Alfred shared his feelings with his father, Sir Gilbert understood. He knew that Alfred had worked hard to build a life for himself abroad. Although it wasn't easy for him, Sir Gilbert decided to let Alfred stay in Ukraine. He wanted his son to be happy, even if it meant being far away from each other. They agreed to keep in touch regularly, and Alfred promised to visit whenever he could. However, as the years passed, nature began to take its course. Sir Gilbert was not as young and strong as he used to be. Running a big business like his delivery company required a lot of energy, and Sir Gilbert started to feel the effect of his age. He wasn't as agile or fit as he once was, and he knew that he couldn't continue to manage everything on his own. Sir Gilbert realized that it was time for Alfred to return home and take over the business. When Sir Gilbert sent the news to Alfred, his son received it with mixed feelings. Alfred knew that his father needed him and he wanted to help, but at the same time, he was so used to his life in Ukraine that the thought of returning to Nigeria felt overwhelming. Alfred had built a life there, made new friends, and grown accustomed to the environment. Going back to Nigeria meant leaving all of that behind. Despite his feelings, Alfred knew that he couldn't let his father down. The business that Sir Gilbert had built was the result of years of hard work and dedication. It was now Alfred's turn to step up and take on the responsibility. With a heavy heart, Alfred made the decision to return to Nigeria and succeed his father in running the business. Alfred eventually made his way back to Nigeria, the land where he was born and raised. As the plane touched down at the airport, Alfred felt a mix of emotions. He was excited to see his father again after so many years, but he was also a bit nervous about returning to a place that now felt so different to him. As soon as Alfred stepped off the plane and walked through the airport, he scanned the crowd for his father. There, standing patiently and looking eagerly around, was Sir Gilbert. The moment Alfred spotted his father, he couldn't contain his joy. Without thinking twice, Alfred ran towards his father with all his might. Sir Gilbert opened his arms wide, and Alfred rushed in them, wrapping his arms tightly around his father. For a moment, they both stood there, holding each other close. Tears of joy filled their eyes as they were finally reunited after so many years. It was a moment of pure happiness for both father and son. Sir Gilbert couldn't believe how much Alfred had grown and changed. Alfred, on the other hand, was filled with warmth and love, knowing he was finally home with a man who had always been there for him. After their joyful reunion, they walked together to the car, still smiling and chatting away. Sir Gilbert was so happy to have his son back that he couldn't stop talking about how much he had missed him. Alfred listened intently, happy to hear his father's voice and stories. They drove home with excitement, bubbling inside them, both eager to catch up on everything they had missed during their time apart. When they arrived home, the house felt alive again. The quietness that Sir Gilbert had grown used to was replaced with laughter and conversation. They spent the rest of the day talking, sharing stories, and catching up on all the things that had happened while Alfred was away. Sir Gilbert told Alfred all about the business and how it had grown, while Alfred shared stories of his life in Ukraine and the friends he had made. As the day grew to a close, Sir Gilbert gently reminded Alfred of the reason he had come back. "You know, my son," he said, "you are here to take over the business. It's time for you to step into my shoes and lead." Alfred nodded, understanding the weight of the responsibility that awaited him. But he wasn't in a hurry. "Dad," Alfred replied, "I know that is why I'm here, but I don't want to rush into anything. I need to sit down and think carefully. I want to strategize on how to run the business properly. I wouldn't like to make any mistakes." Sir Gilbert smiled at his son's thoughtful response. He was proud of Alfred for not wanting to rush into things and for wanting to be careful and wise in his decisions. He knew that Alfred was the right person to take over the business, and he was confident that his son would make him proud. After a few days of careful thinking, Alfred came up with a plan. He realized that if he wanted to understand everything about his father's business, he needed to see it from the ground up. Alfred wanted to know how things really worked and understand what each of the staff was truly made of. He also wanted to find a way to settle down without drawing too much attention to himself. He didn't want people to treat him differently just because he was Sir Gilbert's son. Alfred wanted to be seen for who he truly was, not for what he had. So Alfred made a bold decision. He decided he would work as a delivery guy in his father's company. This way, he could learn the business from the bottom, and see how things were run day to day. He would just be like any other worker, and this would help him understand the strengths and weaknesses of the staff. More importantly, it would give him a chance to see who the genuine people were, the ones who were honest and hardworking. When Alfred told his father about his plan, Sir Gilbert was surprised. At first, he wasn't happy with the idea. "Why would you want to do that?" he asked. "You are supposed to be running the business, not delivering packages." But Alfred explained his reasoning patiently. He told his father that he wanted to know the business inside out, from the ground level to the top. He also wanted to see how people behaved when they didn't know he was the boss's son. Alfred was worried that some of the staff might be pretending to be nice just because they knew he was an influential person. He didn't want to be used or taken advantage of, and this was the best way to avoid that. After listening carefully, Sir Gilbert began understanding his son's point of view. He realized that Alfred's plan was smart and showed maturity. Sir Gilbert agreed that people could sometimes be fake, especially when they wanted to impress someone important. He didn't want Alfred to be surrounded by people who only cared about his wealth and status. "All right, my son," Sir Gilbert finally agreed with a smile. "Let's play this disguising game together. But remember, you have to work hard just like everyone else." The next day, they put their plans into actions. When Alfred arrived at the office with his father, no one knew who he was. So Sir Gilbert gathered all the employees and introduced Alfred as the new delivery guy. "This is Alfred," he said. "He will be working as a delivery man here in our company. I want all of you to welcome and show him how things are done here. Treat him just like you would treat anyone else." The employees were surprised to see someone new. They all nodded and chorused, "Yes, sir." They agreed to help Alfred and show him the ropes. No one knew that the young man standing before them was actually the son of the boss, ready to learn and observe everything. Alfred started his new job as a delivery guy the very next day. He woke up early, put on the company's simple uniform, and prepared himself for the day ahead. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he was ready to face any challenges that came his way. He climbed into his delivery van, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. As he drove through the busy streets of Lagos, he watched the city buzz with life. Cars honked, people rushed around, and the sun shone brightly in the sky. Alfred knew that this was going to be a different experience from anything he had ever done before. At first, the job was hard for Alfred. He wasn't used to the fast pace and the heat of the Lagos sun beating down on him. He had to deliver many packages to different places, and sometimes he got lost in the busy streets. Some of the customers he met were not always kind. One day, Alfred knocked on a door to deliver a package. A man opened the door and immediately started shouting, "Hey, you are late. I've been waiting for hours." "I'm sorry, sir," Alfred said politely, even though he felt annoyed. "There was heavy traffic," Alfred said. "Eh," the man grumbled, clearly not happy. "Just give me my package and go." Alfred handed over the package and walked back to the van, feeling a little upset. He was used to being treated with respect because of who he was. Now, he was just another worker, and some people didn't treat him very well. It was hard for Alfred to adjust to this new reality. He reminded himself why he chose to do this job. He wanted to learn more about his father's business and find people who liked him for who he was, not for his money. But it wasn't easy. Every rude comment of angry customer made him feel frustrated. As the days went by, Alfred began to notice something. Not all the customers were rude. Some were kind and friendly, and they thanked him for bringing their packages. One day, he delivered a package to an old lady. She smiled warmly at him and said, "Thank you so much. You are doing a great job. God bless you." Alfred felt his heart warm at her words. These small moments of kindness made all the hard work worth it. He realized that there were good people out there, people who appreciated his efforts. He started to focus more on these positive interactions and less on the negative ones. He understood that not everyone would treat him kindly, but that was okay. The kindness he did receive made up for the rude remarks. Working as a delivery guy was teaching Alfred many important lessons. He learned about patience, as he had to wait in long lines or deal with traffic. He learned about humility, as he had to do work that was very different from what he was used to. And he learned about empathy, as he saw things from the perspective of the employees and the customers. Alfred also started to see the business from a new angle. He noticed how hard the workers labored and how much effort it took to keep the business running smoothly. He began to appreciate the dedication of the employees and understood the challenges they faced every day. He realized that sometimes, to truly understand others, you need to walk in their shoes. Despite the difficulties, Alfred remained determined. He knew this experience would help him grow as a person and a leader. He wanted to create his own happiness and find peace, not just rely on his father's success. He was focused on discovering the true nature of people around him and finding genuine friends who liked him for who he was. Alfred's adventure was far from over. He kept working hard, delivering packages, and learning valuable lessons each day. He didn't know exactly where this journey would take him, but he was excited to find out. He knew that with each delivery, he was getting closer to understanding more about life, love, and friendship. Sir Gilbert watched his son closely, wondering how he was coping with their plans. He knew Alfred was facing challenges in his new role as a delivery guy. It was not easy to adjust to a new life where people didn't know who he really was. Sir Gilbert had not received any complaints from Alfred, which made him both curious and a little worried. He hoped Alfred was handling everything well and learning valuable lessons along the way. To keep up the appearance that Alfred was just a regular worker, they decided not to come to work together. Sir Gilbert would arrive at the office first, and Alfred would come later in the delivery van. They acted like they barely know each other during work hours. It was all part of the plan to keep Alfred's identity a secret. One day, Sir Gilbert was walking along the company grounds, checking on his employees and seeing how things were going. As he walked past the loading area, he heard loud voices. One voice was especially loud and angry. Sir Gilbert stopped and listened carefully. It sounded like someone was shouting at Alfred. Curious and a bit concerned, Sir Gilbert walked closer to see what was happening. He saw one of the staff, a man named James, yelling at Alfred. James was waving his arms around angrily and speaking in a very rude manner. Alfred, on the other hand, stood calmly, not saying a word. He looked patient and composed, even though James was clearly trying to provoke him. Sir Gilbert approached them slowly, trying to hear what was being said. "I asked you to get me food from the butcher down the street, but you refused," James shouted at Alfred. "You said you were busy. Who do you think you are? You just started working here yesterday, and now you're acting like you're better than me." Sir Gilbert was surprised by what he was hearing. He watched as James continued to shout at Alfred, saying mean and disrespectful things. "You think you're smart, huh? You're just a new delivery guy, and already you are causing problems," James continued angrily. Sir Gilbert couldn't believe his ears. He knew Alfred was new at this job, but he didn't expect someone to treat his son so poorly. He was also amazed at how calm Alfred remained. He didn't shout back or argue. He just stood there quietly, letting James vent his anger. Sir Gilbert decided to step in and calm the situation. He walked over to James and said, "What's going on here?" James turned around, looking a bit surprised to see the boss standing there. "Oh, Sir Gilbert," he stammered, trying to act polite. "This new guy here, he refused to get me food when I asked him to. I was just telling him that we need to work together as a team, that's all." Sir Gilbert looked at Alfred and then back at James. He could see that something wasn't right. He felt hot inside, seeing his son being treated this way. "Okay, everyone, let's calm down," Sir Gilbert said softly. "Alfred, why didn't you get the food for him?" Alfred looked at his father and replied calmly, I was busy with my delivery, sir. I didn't think it was my job to run personal errands for others. Sir Gilbert nodded, understanding his son's point. All right, let's just get back to work, he said, trying to keep the peace. He could see that James was still angry, but he didn't want to cause more trouble right then. He watched as the two men walked away, going back to their tasks. But deep down, Sir Gilbert felt something was wrong. He was hurt by what he had witnessed. He couldn't stand seeing someone treating his son so unfairly, especially when Alfred was trying his best to learn and fit in. Sir Gilbert knew he had to keep a close eye on things, but he didn't want to blow Alfred's cover just yet. What Sir Gilbert didn't know was that James' anger wasn't really about the food. James was upset because Alfred had seen him doing shady things. Alfred had caught James stealing from the company and being rude to customers when no one was looking. James had been acting nice whenever the boss was around, pretending to be a good worker, but when no one was watching, he showed his true colors. Since Alfred had caught him in the act, James had been very angry. He was worried that Alfred might tell the boss what he had seen. He didn't want to lose his job or get into trouble, so he tried to make Alfred's life difficult. James had sworn to deal with Alfred, thinking that he could scare him into keeping quiet. Sir Gilbert had no idea about any of this. He only knew that something wasn't right and that he needed to watch out for his son. As he walked back to his office, he felt a mix of emotions, pride in Alfred for staying calm and worry about the challenges his son might face in the days to come. Alfred continued his job as a delivery guy, working hard every day. He had gotten used to the routine, but not everyone at the company was kind to him. Some staff members treated him poorly because he was new and didn't look very important. His simple uniform and modest appearance made them think he wasn't someone worth respecting. Look at him, one of the workers sneered as Alfred walked by. He doesn't even know how to dress properly. Who does he think he is, coming here like that? Another worker laughed. Yeah, and he's so new. Let's see how long he would last. I bet he doesn't even know half of what he's supposed to be doing. Alfred heard their rude comments, but he didn't let them bother him. He knew that people often judged others by their looks and not by who they truly were. He reminded himself why he was there and focused on learning as much as he could. He wanted to understand the business from the ground up and find out who the real and honest workers were. But not everyone treated Alfred poorly. There was the delivery guy named Greg, who always seemed different from the others. Greg was friendly and often went out of his way to talk to Alfred. Whenever they were on break, Greg would walk over to Alfred and start a conversation. Hey Alfred, Greg would say with a smile, how is your day going? Learning the ropes around here? Alfred would smile back and nod, yeah, it's been good, lots to learn, but I'm getting the hang of it. Greg was kind and patient. He didn't judge Alfred for being new or for not knowing everything. Instead, he shared helpful tips and made Alfred feel welcome. Soon, they became good friends, spending time together during breaks and even after work sometimes. Alfred appreciated Greg's kindness. It was nice to have someone who treated him well, without knowing who he really was. Alfred felt that Greg was unique, someone who cared about people for who they were, not what they had. There was also a girl named Oluchi who worked in the stockroom. She was responsible for keeping track of all the goods that came in and went out. Oluchi was friendly and always had a warm smile on her face. She was hardworking and kind, and she treated everyone with respect. Oluchi noticed how some staff members treated Alfred and didn't like it. She believed in treating everyone fairly, no matter their position. She would often stop by the delivery area to check on things and say hello to Alfred and Greg. Hi, Alfred. Oluchi would greet him with a smile. How is the day treating you? Do you need any help or anything? Alfred would smile back and thank her. I'm good, Oluchi. Just trying to keep up with everything. Thanks for asking. Before long, the three of them, Alfred, Greg, and Oluchi, became very close friends. They would eat lunch together and share stories. Greg and Oluchi liked Alfred because he was humble, hardworking, and always ready to help others. They didn't care about how he dressed or that he was new. They saw that he was a good person, and that was all that mattered to them. One day, as they sat together during a break, Greg leaned in closer and whispered, Alfred, there is something you should know. Some people around here aren't what they seem. They act nice when the boss is around, but when he's not there, they do all sort of things they shouldn't. Alfred nodded, listening carefully. Like what? He asked. Oluchi chimed in. There are few who steal from the company or treat customers badly. They think they can get away with it because they act all sweet in front of Sir Gilbert. You should be careful around them. Alfred thanked them for the warning. He was glad to have friends like Greg and Oluchi, who were honest and trustworthy. He knew they had his back and were looking out for him. Greg and Oluchi continued to share what they knew about the company and its staffs. They were always honest with Alfred, telling him who he could trust and who he should watch out for. They didn't know Alfred's true identity, but they treated him with kindness and respect because that's what they were. Alfred felt grateful for his new friends, even though some staff members ridiculed him and tried to take advantage of him. Greg and Oluchi stood by his side. They showed him that there were still good people in the world who cared about others for the right reasons. As Alfred continued his journey, he learned more and more about the business and the people who worked there. He was discovering who the real and honest workers were, just as he had hoped. And he knew he could count on Greg and Oluchi to help him along the way. One sunny afternoon, Alfred was in the office checking the day's delivery list. He saw that he had an order to deliver a package to a lady named Grace. He carefully packed the item, secured it on his delivery bike, and set off to make the delivery. The roads were busy as usual, with cars honking and people rushing around, but Alfred was used to the hustle and bustle of Lagos. He had learned how to navigate through the traffic with ease, making sure to be safe while also being quick. As he rode through the city road, Alfred thought about how much he was learning every day. Being a delivery guy wasn't easy, but it taught him patience and perseverance. He had met all sorts of people, some nice, some not so nice, but he always tried to stay positive, remembering why he was doing this job in the first place. Halfway through his journey to Grace's house, Alfred's delivery bike suddenly started making strange noises. It sputtered, and before he knew it, the bike came to a complete stop. Alfred frowned and got off the bike, checking to see what was wrong. He tried to start it again, but it wouldn't budge. It seemed like the bike had a serious problem, and he wasn't sure what to do. Alfred looked around and realized he was in a busy part of town. People were walking by, cars were zooming past, and no one seemed to notice that he was in trouble. He knelt down before his bike, trying to figure out what was wrong. He fiddled with the engine and checked the tires, but it was beyond his skills. He wasn't a mechanic. After all, he's just a delivery guy. Time was ticking, and Alfred knew Grace needed her package urgently. He felt a knot of worry from his stomach. He didn't want to be late. He wanted to do a good job and make sure every customer was happy. But right now, he was stuck with a broken bike and he didn't know how to fix it. After trying a few more things with no success, Alfred decided to call for help. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number of the company's mechanic. The mechanic said he would come as quickly as he could, but it might take some time because he was far away. Alfred thanked him and hung up, then sat down on the curb to wait. As he waited, Alfred watched the people passing by. Some were in a hurry, rushing to get somewhere. Others were taking their time, chatting with friends or looking at shop windows. He thought about how everyone had their own lives, their own problems, and their own joys. He wondered if anyone could see his frustration and sadness at that moment. After what felt like forever, the mechanic finally arrived. He took a look at the bike and quickly found the problem. It was a part that had come loose and needed fixing. The mechanic worked fast, and soon the bike was up and running again. Alfred thanked him gratefully, hopped on the bike, and sped off towards Grace's address. He was running very late now and hoped she would understand the delay. When Alfred finally arrived at Gracie's house, he saw her standing at the door with her arms crossed. She didn't look happy. As soon as she spotted him, her face turned red with anger. "Where have you been?" she shouted. "I've been waiting for hours. This is unacceptable." Alfred quickly got off his bike and approached her with the package in his hand. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he said politely. "My bike broke down on the way here and I had to wait for it to be fixed. I came as fast as I could after that." But Grace wasn't listening. She continued to shout at him, her voice loud and filled with frustration. "I don't care about your excuses. I needed this package earlier, and now you've ruined my plans. You are just a delivery boy. You should know how to do your job better." Alfred felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. He wasn't used to being talked to like this. He had always been treated with respect, and now he was being yelled at in the middle of the street. He wanted to explain more, to make her understand that he wasn't to blame, but he could see that Grace wasn't interested in listening. She just wanted to vent her anger. After what felt like a long time, Grace finally stopped shouting. She snatched the package from Alfred's hand with a huff and turned on her heel, slamming the door behind her without another word. Alfred stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. He had done his best to get the package to her as soon as he could, but sometimes things went wrong beyond his control. As Alfred walked back to his bike, he couldn't help but wonder why such a pretty girl would have such an ill-mannered attitude. She had been so quick to judge him and didn't care to hear his side of the story. Alfred had hoped to meet kind and understanding people, but encounters like this made him question his plan. He wondered if he was making the right decision by pretending to be a delivery guy. Was he really going to find the genuine connections he was looking for? But Alfred reminded himself of the lessons he had learned so far. He had discovered that not everyone would be kind or understanding. But that didn't mean he should give up. He knew he had to keep going, to push through the tough times and focus on the good ones. He couldn't let one bad experience stop him from his goal of finding true friends and understanding his father's business better. Alfred got back on his bike, took a deep breath, and rode away. He was determined to continue his journey, no matter how hard it might get. He knew that somewhere out there, he would find the genuine connections he was looking for. His adventure was far from over, and he was ready to face whatever came next. Grace stormed into her house, still feeling angry from the encounter with the delivery guy. She had been waiting for her package all day, and when it finally arrived late, she couldn't hold back her frustration. She was used to getting things on time and didn't like delays. The delivery guy, Alfred, had tried to explain what happened, but she didn't want to listen. She had shouted at him and walked away angrily. But now, as she sat down to rest, her anger began to fade. Grace thought about the delivery guy's face. He had been calm and gentle, even when she was shouting. He hadn't argued back or been rude. He had simply tried to explain himself and apologize. She felt a small pang of guilt in her heart. Maybe she had been too harsh on him. He was just doing his job, and sometimes things went wrong. Grace tried to push the thought away. "I needed my package urgently," she told herself again. "I had every right to be upset." But deep down, she knew that being upset didn't mean she should be unkind. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she might have overreacted. The delivery guy seemed like a nice person, and she had treated him poorly. A whole week passed, and Grace continued with her daily routine, but the memory of that day stayed in her mind. One afternoon, while driving through a busy junction, she spotted someone familiar. It was the delivery guy. This time, he wasn't on his bike instead. He was walking along the side of the road, looking like he was heading home. Grace was surprised to see him again. She slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. her heart beating a little faster. Hey, excuse me, she called out, waving her hand to get his attention. Alfred, deep in thought, didn't notice her at first. But then he heard someone calling and he turned around. He saw a woman waving at him from a nice car parked on the other side of the road. He was puzzled at first, not recognizing her right away. Grace smiled as she saw him looking in her direction. She got out of her car and walked towards him. Do you remember me? She asked with a shy smile. Alfred looked closely at her and then remembered. Oh, yes, he said politely. You are the lady I delivered the package to last week. Grace nodded, feeling a little embarrassed. Yes, that was me. I wanted to apologize for how I acted. I was having a very bad day and I took it out on you. I shouldn't have done that. I'm really sorry. Alfred smiled gently. It's okay, I understand. Everyone has bad days. You don't need to apologize. Grace was relieved to hear his kind words. She could see that he really meant it and wasn't holding any grudge. She felt grateful and wanted to make up for her behavior. Are you heading home? She asked. Would you like a ride? Alfred hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should accept her offer, but she seemed sincere, and he didn't want to be rude. All right, thank you, he said finally. He walked over to her car and got in. As Grace started driving, they began to talk. Grace asked Alfred about his job, and he told her stories about the different deliveries he made and the people he met. Some were nice and some were not so nice, but he always tried to do his best. Grace listened carefully, fascinated by his experiences. She had never really thought about what it was like to be a delivery person. What do you like to do when you are not working? Grace asked curiously. Alfred thought for a moment. I like to read and learn new things. I also enjoy going to new places and meeting people. It's interesting to see how different everyone is. Grace smiled. I like that too. I love to travel and explore new cultures. It's always exciting to meet new people and learn about their lives. As they talked, they found out they had the same things in common. They both enjoyed reading, learning, and meeting new people. Grace was surprised at how easy it was to talk to Alfred. He was kind, humble, and seemed to have a good heart. She felt a connection with him, something she didn't expect. Before long, they reached a quiet area, and Alfred asked her to drop him off there. He didn't want her to know exactly where he lived. He liked to keep his personal life private, especially since he had just met Grace. Thank you for the ride, he said as he got out of the car. And don't worry about last week. It's all forgotten. Grace smiled. I'm glad we met again. It was nice talking to you. Maybe we can do this again sometime. Alfred nodded. I would like that. They exchanged phone numbers and said goodbye. As Grace drove off, Alfred waited until she was out of sight before he started walking towards his home. He didn't want her to know where he lived just yet. He was still careful about revealing too much about himself. As he walked, he felt a sense of happiness. Meeting Grace again had been a pleasant surprise, and this time on a much nicer note. He sensed she was well-to-do because she looked sophisticated and drove an expensive car, but she also seemed kind and willing to make amends, which made Alfred feel good about their encounter. Alfred knew that his journey was full of surprises and lessons. Every day, he was learning more about people and himself. He understood that every encounter, whether good or bad, was part of his path to finding genuine happiness and love. And with a smile on his face, he looked forward to seeing where this adventure would take him next. After their unexpected second meeting, Alfred and Grace continued to see each other. Each time they met, they enjoyed each other's company more and more. Alfred admires Grace because she treated everyone with respect and kindness. Even though she seemed to have a lot of money, she wasn't proud or boastful like some people he had met before. She was humble and friendly, which made Alfred feel comfortable around her. Grace, on the other hand, was fascinated by Alfred's calmness. No matter what happened, he always stayed calm and patient. She liked how he never got angry or upset over small things, and she felt she could talk to him about anything. They met on one or two occasions after that day at the park. Each time, they talked about many things: books they loved, places they wanted to visit, and their dreams for the future. Grace liked how Alfred listened carefully whenever she spoke. He always had something thoughtful to say, and she felt she could talk to him for hours without getting bored. Alfred also enjoyed listening to Grace. He found her to be intelligent and kind, with a good heart. One sunny afternoon, they decided to meet at a quiet park again. It was a beautiful place, filled with tall trees and colorful flowers. Birds sang in the branches above, and the soft breeze made the leaves rustle gently. They sat on a bench under a big tree, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. They talked for a while, sharing stories about their lives and laughing at some of the funny things that had happened to them. After some time, Grace became curious about Alfred's background. She had noticed how smart and knowledgeable he was. She wondered if he had gone to a good school or if he had any special training. She decided to ask him. Alfred, she began carefully, you are such a smart person. I'm curious. What are your qualifications? Did you go to the university? Alfred hesitated for a moment. He hadn't expected her to ask about his education, but he decided to be honest with her. Yes, I did, he replied quietly. Grace couldn't believe it. Why would someone with university qualifications be working as a delivery guy? She looked up at Alfred, still surprised. Why are you doing this job? She asked, her voice filled with confusion. You could get a much better job with your qualifications. Alfred shrugged and smiled a little. That's life for you, he said softly. Sometimes things don't go as planned. I had a good job once, but things changed. Now I'm just trying to make the best of my life. Grace was stunned. She had always thought people with good grades and good educations could easily get good jobs, but Alfred's story showed her that life could be unpredictable. She felt a mix of surprise and concern for him. I'm really sorry to hear that, she said gently. Maybe I can help you. I have some connections. I could try to use my influence to get you a better job. Alfred appreciated her kindness. He could see that she genuinely wanted to help, but he also knew that he had to be careful. He wasn't ready to reveal his true identity yet. Thank you, Grace, he said, smiling warmly. I appreciate your offer, but I'm okay for now. I will let you know if I need help. Grace nodded, respecting his decision, but she felt even more admiration for Alfred. Despite his situation, he didn't seem bitter or angry. He remained calm and humble, which made her respect him even more. As they continued to spend time together, it became clear that there was a special connection between them. Alfred found himself looking forward to their meetings. He liked talking to Grace and felt comfortable around her. She was different from anyone he had ever met. She was kind, understanding, and didn't judge him by his job or appearance. He felt he could trust her. Grace, too, found herself thinking about Alfred often. She admired his courage and the way he handled life's challenges with grace and patience. She liked how he didn't let his situation define him and how he remained positive despite everything. She could see that he was a good person, someone with integrity and a strong character. However, both Alfred and Grace were careful. They had been hurt before and didn't want to rush into anything. Alfred didn't want to get hurt again, and Grace didn't want to fall for someone who might take advantage of her. She had heard stories of people pretending to be something they were not just to gain someone's trust. But something about Alfred made her believe he was different. She couldn't explain why, but she trusted her instincts. She felt that Alfred was sincere and not the type to take advantage of her. As days turned into weeks, their friendship continued to blossom. They found comfort in each other's company and shared their hopes and dreams. Grace often thought about how much she enjoyed spending time with Alfred. She wondered if he felt the same way. Alfred, on the other hand, was beginning to see Grace as more than just a friend. He was drawn to her kindness and generosity, and he appreciated how she treated him with respect and care. One evening, as they walked along a quiet path, Grace looked up at Alfred. "Do you ever wonder where life would take us?" she asked softly. Alfred smiled, looking ahead at the path before them. "All the time," he replied, "but I believe that as long as we stay true to ourselves and keep doing our best, good things will happen. Life is full of surprises, and sometimes the best things come when we least expect them." Grace nodded, agreeing with his words. She felt a warmth in her heart, knowing that she had found a true friend in Alfred, someone who understood her and shared her outlook on life. She was excited to see where their friendship would lead and what the future held for them. One day, Grace decided to surprise Alfred. She had never seen where he worked, and she was curious to learn more about his daily life. She knew he was a delivery guy, but she didn't know much else about his job. She thought it would be nice to visit and see for herself. So she got into her car and drove to the address Alfred had mentioned once during one of their conversations. When Grace arrived at Alfred's workplace, she parked her car a little distance away so she could observe for a while. She watched as different delivery trucks came in and out of the building, with people moving packages around. After a few minutes, she spotted Alfred. He was carrying a box and talking to one of his colleagues. Grace smiled to herself, feeling happy to see him. Alfred, on the other hand, had no idea that Grace was there. He was busy with his work, making sure everything was in order. Suddenly, he turned around and saw Grace standing not too far away. He was surprised and a bit uncomfortable. He hadn't expected her to come to his workplace. His heart started beating faster, and he wondered what she might think of him now that she saw him doing his job. His colleagues noticed Grace too. They were surprised to see such a well-dressed and beautiful lady standing there, looking at Alfred with a smile. One of them, James, was especially curious. He didn't know much about Alfred's personal life and was always looking for a chance to tease him. Seeing Grace, he thought this was his perfect opportunity. James walked over to Alfred with a sly grin on his face. "Hey, Alfred," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "You have a visitor. Better go and deliver that package quickly, or she might leave." James thought Grace didn't know that Alfred was a delivery guy. He expected her to be shocked or embarrassed, but to his surprise, Grace didn't seem bothered at all. She smiled warmly at Alfred and waved at him. This confused James. He didn't understand why Grace wasn't surprised or embarrassed. Before Alfred could respond, another colleague, Greg, quickly stepped in. Greg was one of the few people at the company who liked Alfred and respected him. He saw what James was trying to do and decided to help Alfred out. "Hey, Alfred," Greg said, "I'll handle the delivery for you. You can stay and talk with your guest." Alfred was grateful for Greg's kindness. He nodded and thanked him, then walked over to Grace. "Let's go over there," Alfred suggested, pointing to a quieter spot a little far away from the company building. Grace agreed, and they walked together to a place where they could talk privately. They chatted for a while, enjoying each other's company. Grace asked him how his day was going, and Alfred told her about his work. He felt more relaxed now that they were away from his workplace. Grace seemed genuinely interested in what he did, and Alfred appreciated that. He was amazed that she wasn't ashamed of his job as a delivery guy. She treated him with the same kindness and respect as always. After some time, Grace said she needed to leave. She had enjoyed her visit and was glad to see where Alfred worked. Alfred thanked her for coming, and Grace smiled, saying it was her pleasure. She then got into her car and drove away, leaving Alfred standing there, smiling to himself. He whispered softly, "She's the one," he said. He was touched by her kindness and understanding, and he felt a strong connection with her. As Alfred walked back to the company, he felt happier than he had in a long time, but his mood quickly changed when he saw James and a few other staff waiting for him. They were grinning, ready to make fun of him. James started teasing him again. "Alfred, you think you can win over a Lagos big girl with your delivery job?" he mocked. "You will spend all your money on her and you will still end up poor." You have nothing to do with expensive girls like her. Some of the other staffs laughed, joining in the teasing. Alfred felt a bit annoyed, but he didn't let it show. He knew they didn't understand what he had with Grace. He decided not to say anything and just smiled, remembering Grace's visit. Suddenly, Oluchi, one of the women who worked at the company, stepped in. She didn't like how James and the others were teasing Alfred. Leave him alone, Oluchi said firmly. It's not Alfred's fault that these so-called Lagos big girls find him attractive. And by the way, his girlfriend is very beautiful. The others felt silent, surprised by Oluchi's words. Alfred was grateful to her for standing up for him. He smiled and thanked her quietly. He knew that not everyone would understand his friendship with Grace, but he didn't mind. He was just happy to have someone like Grace in his life who appreciated him for who he was, no matter what job he did. The day ended with a positive note for Alfred. He felt more confident about his friendship with Grace and more determined to continue being himself, no matter what anyone else thought. He knew he was on the right path, and he was excited to see where it would lead. After several months of working at the delivery company, Alfred finally felt it was time to reveal his true identity. He had learned a lot during his time there, not just about the work but also about the people. He had seen who was kind and who was not, who was hardworking and who only pretended to be. Most importantly, he had learned a lot about himself. He had met Grace and realized she saw him for who he was, not for what he did. Alfred knew it was time to stop pretending to just be an ordinary delivery guy. He needed to tell the truth, not just for himself, but also for Grace, who had been nothing but kind and understanding. He decided to talk to his father, Sir Gilbert, about his decision. One evening, after dinner, Alfred sat down with his father in the living room. Sir Gilbert noticed that his son seemed more serious than usual. Is everything okay, Alfred? He asked, curious about what was on his mind. Yes, Dad, Alfred replied. I think it's time. I'm done with this disguise game. I've learned what I needed to learn, and now I want to come clean. Sir Gilbert nodded. He had been waiting for this moment. I understand, he said. I'm proud of you, Alfred. You wanted to see how people treated you without knowing who you were. And now you know. So what's next? There's also something else, Dad, Alfred continued. I've met someone. Her name is Grace, and she's different from anyone I've ever met. She is kind, honest, and she doesn't care about my job or how much money I have. I think she's special, and I want her to know the real me. Sir Gilbert smiled widely. He was happy to hear that Alfred had found someone who appreciated him for who he was. That's wonderful, Alfred, he said. I'm so glad you found someone like that, and I'm glad you've decided to reveal the truth. It's time to show everyone who you really are. The next morning, Sir Gilbert decided to take Alfred to the company himself. He wanted to be there when his son revealed his true identity. They both dressed up nicely, with Alfred looking very different from the delivery guy his colleagues were used to seeing. They got into Sir Gilbert's car and drove to the company together. When they arrived at the company, everyone was surprised to see Alfred with Sir Gilbert, especially since Alfred was dressed in a suit and looked very suffocated. The employees started whispering among themselves, wondering what was going on. Greg, who had always been kind to Alfred, tried to catch his eye to understand what was happening, but Alfred just smiled and gave a smile back. Sir Gilbert stepped out of the car and Alfred followed him. They walked into the building together. The staff couldn't believe their eyes. James, who had often teased Alfred, looked especially confused. He wondered why Alfred was with the boss and why he was dressed so nicely. He had always thought Alfred was just a simple delivery guy. Sir Gilbert called for everyone to gather in the main office. The staff quickly assembled, curious about what their boss had to say. Sir Gilbert looked at the group of employees and smiled. He could see their confusion, but he was proud of what was about to happen. Good morning, everyone, Sir Gilbert began. I have something important to share with you all today. Some of you might be surprised, but it's time for you to meet someone properly. I would like to introduce to you my son, Alfred." There was a stunned silence in the room. The employees looked at each other, then back at Alfred. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Alfred, the quiet delivery guy who had been working alongside them for months, was actually the son of Sir Gilbert, their boss. And that's not all. Sir Gilbert continued. "Alfred is not just my son. From today onward, he would be the new CEO of this company. He has learned a lot during his time here, and I trust him to lead this company with the wisdom and kindness he has shown while working with you." The shock on everyone's faces were clear. James was more shocked than anyone else. He couldn't believe it. He felt his mouth drop open in surprise, and his heart started to race. He remembered all the times he had teased Alfred, thinking he was just a regular delivery guy. Now he realized that Alfred was the boss's son and the new CEO. He regretted how he had treated Alfred and worried about what would happen to him now. Greg and Oluchi, who had been kind to Alfred, were also surprised, but in a good way. They smiled, happy for Alfred and glad they had treated him well. They now understood why Alfred had been so humble and hardworking. Sir Gilbert finished his speech and then left the room, giving Alfred a moment to speak to the staff. Alfred looked at the group of people before him. He knew this was a big moment, not just for him, but for everyone there. "Thank you all for your support," Alfred said with a calm voice. "I know this might come as a surprise, but I am grateful for the experience I've had here. I've learned a lot from each one of you, and I hope to continue working together to make this company even better. Let's return to our jobs and continue to do our best." With that, Alfred ended his speech and signaled for everyone to go back to work. The employees slowly returned to their task, still murmuring about what had just happened. Alfred watched them go, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. He knew the next steps would be very important, and he was ready to take the challenges. Alfred had a special plan in mind for Grace. He wanted to surprise her by revealing his true identity and to show her that he was more than just a delivery guy. He was grateful for how she had treated him, even when she thought he was just an ordinary worker. He knew it was time to share his secret. One afternoon, Alfred called Grace on the phone. He tried to sound worried and in some sort of trouble. "Grace, can you please come to the office?" he asked, his voice sounding a little shaky. "It's important. I really need you right now." Grace was worried. She could hear the urgency in Alfred's voice, and she didn't want to waste any time. She quickly got into her car and drove as fast as she could to the company where Alfred worked. Her heart was racing, and she wondered what could have happened to make Alfred sound like that. When Grace arrived at the office, everything seemed calm. She was confused. There was no sign of trouble, no panic, nothing out of the ordinary. She got out of her car and walked towards the building, looking around carefully. She stopped a staff member and asked, "Is Alfred here?" The staff member looked at her and nodded respectfully. "Yes, he is, boss," the person replied. Grace was surprised to hear them call Alfred boss. She wondered if she had heard them wrong. "Did you just say boss?" she asked, trying to understand what was going on. "Yes, ma'am," the staff member said with a smile. "Alfred is our new CEO." Grace couldn't believe her ears. She was even more confused now. What was going on? She walked further into the office, and there she saw Alfred coming out of a room. He was dressed in a smart suit, looking very different from how she had seen him before. He looked confident and happy, not like someone in trouble. "Alfred!" Grace exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. "What's going on? Are you going for a job interview or something? Why are you dressed like this?" Alfred couldn't help but smile at Grace's reaction. He walked up to her and gently took her hand. "Grace, I need to explain something to you," he said softly. "I'm not just a delivery guy. This company actually belongs to my father, and now he has made me the CEO." Grace was shocked. She felt like she was in a dream. "You own this company?" she asked, trying to make sense of everything. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Alfred sighed and looked down for a moment. I wanted to see how people would treat me if they didn't know who I was, he explained. I wanted to find someone who liked me for me, not just for my job or money. And then I met you. Grace, you treated me with kindness and respect, even when you thought I was just a delivery guy. That meant a lot to me. Grace was quiet for a moment, trying to process everything Alfred had said. She felt a mix of emotion, surprise, confusion, and a little bit of anger. You should have told me the truth, Alfred, she said softly. I don't like being lied to. Alfred quickly shook his head and gently squeezed her hand. I know, and I'm sorry, he said sincerely. I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted to be sure about how you felt. Please forgive me. Grace, I really care about you, and I didn't want to lose you. Grace looked into Alfred's eyes and saw that he was being honest. She could see that he genuinely cared about her and didn't want to hurt her. She took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, Alfred, she said finally. I understand why you did it. I'm not happy about it, but I understand. Just don't keep any more secrets from me, okay? Alfred smiled with a relief and nodded. I promise, he said. No more secrets. With that settled, Alfred took Grace to meet his father. Sir Gilbert was delighted to meet the woman who had captured his son's heart. He welcomed Grace warmly and thanked her for being such a positive influence on Alfred. The following week, Alfred decided it was time to address the whole company. He wanted to make some changes to help the company grow and to ensure everyone was treated fairly. He called a meeting with all the staff and stood before them, ready to speak. Thank you all for coming, Alfred began. As you know, I am now the CEO of this company. I have had the chance to work alongside many of you, and I have seen the good work you do. But there are some things that need to change for us to be even better. He looked around the room, making sure everyone was listening. First, I want to talk about respect and kindness. Everyone here deserves to be treated with respect, no matter what their job is. I have seen some people like James who haven't always been kind or fair to others. James shifted nervously in his seat, his face turning red. He knew exactly what Alfred was talking about, and he felt ashamed of how he had behaved. Alfred continued, James, this is your last chance. I believe everyone deserves an opportunity to change, and I'm giving you that chance. But if I see any more disrespectful behavior, I will have no choice but to let you go. James nodded quickly, grateful for the chance to make things right. He had been worried ever since Alfred's true identity was revealed. He knew he had made mistakes, and he didn't want to lose his job because of them. Alfred then spoke about some changes he wanted to make to help the company grow and improve. He talked about new training programs, better working conditions, and ways to help everyone succeed. The staff listened carefully, nodding in agreement. They could see that Alfred was serious about making positive changes. After the meeting, James walked up to Alfred. He looked nervous, but he wanted to say something. Thank you, Alfred, he said quietly. I know I haven't been the best person, but I am sorry. I promise to be better. Alfred smiled and nodded. I appreciate that, James, he said. We all make mistakes, but what matters is that we learn from them and try to be better. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in the company began to change. The staff felt more motivated, knowing that Alfred cared about their well-being. James also tried to change his behavior, treating everyone with more respect and kindness. Meanwhile, Alfred and Grace's relationship grew stronger. They spent more time together, getting to know each other even better. Alfred admired Grace's kindness and understanding, and Grace appreciated Alfred's honesty and strength. They knew they had something special. One evening, as they were walking in a quiet park, Alfred felt his heart beating fast. He knew this was the moment. He turned to Grace and looked into her eyes. Grace, he began, his voice steady but full of emotions. You've been such a wonderful part of my life. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? Grace was taken aback. She hadn't expected this, but she felt a rush of happiness. She looked at Alfred, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Yes, Alfred, she replied with a big smile. I will marry you. They hugged each other tightly, knowing that this was the start of a beautiful new chapter in their lives. They had found love in the most unexpected places, and now they were ready to build a future together. Soon after, Alfred and Grace got married in a simple but beautiful ceremony. Their friends and family gathered to celebrate their love. Even the staff from the company were there, happy to see their boss find happiness. James, who had been given a second chance, attended the wedding with a genuine smile on his face. He was grateful to Alfred for believing in him and giving him the opportunity to change. As Alfred and Grace stood together, holding hands and looking at all the people who had come to share in their joy, they felt truly blessed. They knew they had a bright future ahead, filled with love, kindness, and adventures. And so, Alfred and Grace lived happily ever after, knowing that they had found something truly special in each other. They continued to work hard, lead the company with integrity, and always remember the importance of kindness, respect, and love. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on, waiting to whisk us away on new adventures, where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.